Penguin Random House Audio presents I'm Fine and Other Lies. This is the author, Whitney Cummings. For all the voices in my head who told me I could never write a book, this book is for you. Introduction. When I was about 12 years old, one of my favorite things to do, besides making desperate audition tapes for MTV's The Real World, was going to yard sales and perusing strangers' junk. I, of course, mean peruse the stuff they were selling, although I'm sure I also checked out a couple of dudes' actual junk on more than one occasion, given I was a very curious child, and this was before porn was free. I just loved looking at the tables of old trinkets and fabricating a narrative of what the sellers' lives were like. Old skis, a chessboard, and dusty encyclopedias inspired me to fantasize about the sellers' mysterious lives. Maybe they were detectives or spies or on the run from the law for some glamorous crime they'd committed. In retrospect, I now realize they were probably just going through a divorce and needed to get rid of their ex's shit ASAP. But at the time, this activity was a romantic escape from reality and perhaps the first evidence that I wanted to make up stories for a living. I was also a pathological liar until I was like 15, but that's a way less sexy genesis of my occupation. During one of these garbage ogling sessions, I came across a book called Couplehood by Paul Reiser. At the time, I was too young to know who Paul Reiser was, and some of you still might be, which is very annoying, but in this book, he hilariously recounted the daily confusions and humiliations of being in a committed relationship. At that point in my life, I had never been in a committed relationship with anything except anxiety and head lice, and I'm pretty sure my imaginary marriage to Luke Perry didn't count. But I somehow related to the book anyway. Reading about Paul Reiser's foibles made me feel relieved and weirdly understood. Whether I could articulate it or not back then, I had some sort of epiphany that other people's misfortune made me feel way better about my own problems. I believe the official term for this phenomenon is schadenfreude. I mean, count on the Germans to have a specific word for something so sadistic. Couplehood made me feel less ashamed of the twisted and often inverted way that I saw the world. It also made me feel better about how obsessed I got over minutia that most people didn't even seem to notice. Nobody else seemed to care about how weird it was that the salad bar at the Sizzler had chocolate pudding right next to the chickpeas. But this took up space in my brain for days as I tried to figure out what kind of psychopath did the arranging of those fixins. Nobody seemed as stressed out as I was that Band-Aids always felt slightly racist for not having a selection of different shades of skin colors. I mean, I'm sure by now they have a kaleidoscope of shades available, but in the late 80s, only waxy white people could protect their wounds without drawing too much attention to them. Anyway, nobody wanted to listen to my rants about the injustice of racially insensitive Band-Aids, so I was inspired to write down my observations whenever I could. I found an old typewriter in my aunt's basement and used to hack away at it every chance I got. Yes, there were computers back then. I'm not that old, but computers saved documents, and I didn't want to risk anyone reading my insane diatribes. Plus, the typewriter made me feel smart and sophisticated. I mean, to feel sophisticated, I probably could have just stopped curling my bangs, but at that point in my life, common sense wasn't really on my radar. I always dreamed that these masturbatory ramblings would one day be the seed of a book, but my self-esteem has always been way too low to follow through with it. I always told myself I'd wait to write a book until I had actually accumulated enough entertaining mistakes to make the read worth your time. I realize that it's a big deal that you're even listening to this, given how much is available for entertainment these days. I mean, YouTube videos of babies eating lemons and girls falling off stripper poles and apps that remix your face with a dog's. Look, it took me forever to finish writing this book because of these exact distractions. But once I got focused enough to be able to finally get this stuff down, please know that I set the bar high, constantly asking myself, can this compete with a video of a guy falling off a ladder on the Home Shopping Network? Folks, I think it can. I was finally able to stave off my social media and online shopping addictions long enough to give you a whole book's worth of delicious, humiliating schadenfreude. For example, I shaved an entire eyebrow off after eating too much edible weed. Whoops. I started balding from not eating enough fat. Whoops again. I broke my shoulder trying to impress a guy, and I came very close to spending my life in a Guatemalan prison. For years, I've kept these stories as bullet points in overpriced journals, figuring I would eventually find the courage to talk about them on stage, but frankly, they were just too embarrassing. That said, I actually think that these stories are better illustrated in book form, or virtual eyeball drones, or whatever people are reading on by the time this book comes out. In addition to hoarding mortifying situations that'll make you feel way better about your own life choices, I've also accumulated a compendium of knowledge that I believe could save you a lot of time. Look, you're busy. You have a family, maybe even a secret family. You have a life, maybe even a double life. You have a husband, a wife, a Facebook page. I don't have any of those things. So think of me as your personal assistant who went to like 1 billion doctors and got you all the information you don't have time to get yourself and that Wikipedia will just lie to you about. Think of this book as the internet if it was honest and didn't hate women so much. When I do stand-up, I need to make a joke about every 20 seconds or so. If I see someone in the audience cringing at what I'm saying or generally looking traumatized by the subject matter, I have to lighten the mood by changing the subject or deflecting with the joke. Writing a book gave me the freedom to not be funny every now and then so that I could actually dig into some raw truths that I think can be healing for everyone. With a book, I can't really read the room or see your reaction, so I'm able to kind of go off the grid emotionally without you guys shaming me into keeping the material safe or socially acceptable. I feel like I'm finally able to share my most embarrassing foibles, whether it was lying to therapists or driving myself to the ER when I was hemorrhaging blood from my head or having explosive diarrhea in a literal jungle. I've spent the last 5 years rewiring my brain, ending toxic relationships, combating insomnia, experimenting with antidepressants, struggling with love, or what I thought was love, talking to an imaginary child, and freezing my eggs. As a result, most of the time I spend with my friends is consumed by them asking me how I worked my ass off to change my brain and how I worked my ass on to get the body I want. Friends and even strangers ask me how I got good skin and how I kicked my eating disorder, stopped dating narcissists, and quit letting my ego run the show, and how I generally stopped being cray-cray. I just feel like it would make life way easier to be able to just say, hey, how about you just read this book so I don't have to spend every social event rambling on about neurology when I'd much rather be spending the evening flirting with a guy who's terrible for me. I've spent tens of thousands of dollars accruing information from a smorgasbord of doctors, psychiatrists, healers, teachers, and people who jam things up my butt while making unflinching eye contact with me. Look, if you get anything out of this book, it's that you do not ever need to put anything up your bottom hole unless you really want to. And even then, you certainly don't have to pay for it. So if I may be so bold, I straight up want this book to change your life. I personally was sick of being a mess, and I'm also sick of you being a mess, so let's get our shit together. Together. The self-help chapter. I have some good news for you. I love you. And because I love you, you're about to get like $100,000 worth of psychological therapy for the measly price of this book. I'm not proud of this, but I've spent an embarrassing amount of money I never really had in the first place on mental health professionals, some of which I should probably put in quotes, as in mental health professionals. This is an audiobook, so you don't see me making the little bunny ears, but I'm making them. Traipsing along this yellow brick road of healers, I didn't get to Oz, although I did see pink horses a couple of times due to low blood sugar from stupid cleanses. The butthead. I went to let's just call him a nutritionist once, who I should have known was trouble because he went only by his first name. Let's just call him Dr. Bob, even though the real name he went by is even more ridiculous and sounds like a corny DJ who plays cheesy music you would have heard at your uncle's third wedding in the early 90s. Let me be clear. A doctor going by Doctor followed by his first name is a red flag, unless it's Dr. Dre, in which case it's at least worth going to for the story. The fact that I paid money to go to a nutritionist who went by his first name only meant the kind of doctor I actually needed to go to was a psychiatrist. Dr. Bob was the skinniest person I had ever met, and that's saying a lot given how much time I spend.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?